Billionaire CEO came to court for business, then cried at two words, "We're hungry." He was worth over $2 billion. But he sat down on a cold courthouse bench beside four little girls who whispered, "We're hungry, sir." He could have walked away. His lawyers were waiting. His name was being signed into a new merger on the 12th floor. But something in their silence, something in the way the youngest held her sister's hand like it was the only thing she had left, it cracked him open in a place he didn't even know still existed. "Where's your mom?" he asked. The oldest looked up and said, "She's in there." The man with the watch said she stole it, but he lied. And just like that, the man who always kept his distance forgot how to leave. He never missed a meeting. Not once in 20 years. Graham King was the kind of man who read 5 newspapers before sunrise and shaved with a blade sharper than his own reputation. CEO of King Holdings. Richer than most cities, and colder than most rooms he walked into. His calendar was gospel, his schedule sacred. But that morning, outside courtroom 3B, time stopped. 4 little girls sat in silence on a wooden bench, shoes scuffed, braids uneven, dresses too thin for the chill in the air. And not one person stopped. Not the attorneys with $1,000 watches. Not the clerks juggling files. Only him. The man whose entire world was built on walking past anything that didn't serve him, paused. And one of the girls, maybe 5, maybe 6, looked up at him with those 2 quiet eyes and whispered, "We're hungry, sir." Not begging, not crying, just telling the truth. And somehow, that was worse. "Where's your mother?" He didn't mean to sound harsh, but the question cracked in his throat. "Inside," one of them said. "She didn't steal. He lied because she said no." That part she whispered. Like even now, she knew how to protect her mom. Graham looked down the hallway, courtroom 3B. No lawyer with her. No family. Just 4 little girls on a bench, waiting for a mother who might walk out in handcuffs. And that's when it happened. The first thing he hadn't planned in decades. He sat down, right there, on the bench beside them. And when one of the girls offered him half her cracker, he felt something break in his chest. Not pain, not pity, recognition. Because once, a long time ago, he'd sat on a bench too. Alone, cold, and completely forgotten. He'd sworn no one would ever see that boy again. But looking at them now, the way they leaned on each other, the way the smallest one rubbed her sister's back like a mother would, he knew. He wasn't looking at weakness. He was looking at survival. And something in him whispered, louder than any deal he'd ever made, "This is what matters, this, right here." Before he could stop himself, he turned to the court officer and said, "Find out who their mother is, now." The officer glanced at him like he was crazy, but Graham didn't care. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about what he had to gain. He was thinking about who he could stand beside. What if the one moment you didn't plan becomes the only one that matters? Chapter 1. 4 girls on a bench. He didn't plan to stop. He had a merger to sign, a team waiting upstairs, and his name on the front page of every business column that morning. But then he saw them. 4 little girls sitting shoulder to shoulder on a courthouse bench, too small for the world around them. They didn't fidget, didn't play, they just sat. Still, eyes wide, shoes dangling off the edge. He slowed, without realizing he had. One of them, maybe 6 years old, looked up with pale blue eyes and said quietly, "We're hungry, sir." Not asking, not whining, just the truth, unapologetic and bare. He froze, not because of the words but the way she said them, like hunger was just part of life, like being unnoticed was normal. He crouched down slowly. "Where's your mom?" "Inside," the older girl replied. Courtroom with the red door. The smallest one leaned her head on her sister's shoulder. Her eyes were already half closed. Tired, not from the day, but from the kind of waiting that leaves bruises on your heart. He glanced around the hall. Lawyers in polished shoes, secretaries with clipboards, a vending machine humming in the corner. No one else had stopped. No one even looked. He stood up and walked out. 15 minutes later, he came back, not with his legal team, but with paper bags filled with food from the cafe across the street. Sandwiches, juice boxes, fruit cups. He handed the bags to them carefully. They didn't tear into it like he expected. They unwrapped things slowly, divided it evenly, offered the juiciest apple slice to the youngest. One girl even wiped her sister's mouth with a napkin. It wasn't desperation he saw. It was discipline, survival, and something in him, something cold and buried, shifted. He sat down beside them, unsure what he was doing, unsure why he couldn't walk away. The oldest looked at him again. "Are you a lawyer?" He shook his head. "Just someone here for some papers." She studied him. "You wear a fancy watch like Mr. Trevor." He blinked. "Who's that?" "Our mom's boss," another girl said. "He said she took his watch." "But she didn't," the first one added. "She said no to him, so now he's mad." He didn't speak. He couldn't. The words felt too big, too sharp. He turned his gaze to the courtroom door across the hallway. Then he stood and walked to the nearby officer. "The woman in courtroom 3, Maya Jennings, what's her charge?" The man looked up. "Theft. Her boss says she stole a watch." "Did anyone come with her, represent her?" The officer shook his head. "Nope. She walked in alone." Graham nodded once, then turned back to the bench. He sat down again. He didn't open his briefcase, didn't look at his watch. He just stayed. And when one of the girls offered him a broken cookie from the corner of her bag, something in his chest broke, so quietly, it didn't make a sound. But he felt it. He smiled, took the cookie and said, "Thanks." Echoed. It was the most human moment he'd had in years. And he never saw it coming. Chapter 2. The Woman in the Blue Dress. The courtroom door creaked open. Graham looked up just as a woman stepped out, shoulders drawn tight, a manila folder clutched to her chest like a shield. Her dress was neat but worn, her shoes scuffed. Her eyes, those were the thing that stopped him. She saw the girls first, and everything in her changed. She rushed to them like breath finally reaching lungs. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, kneeling. "I didn't think it would take this long. Did anyone—" "They ate," the oldest said softly. "He brought food." The woman turned, startled. He stood slowly. "They said they were hungry." I couldn't ignore that. For a second, she didn't speak. Just blinked like she wasn't sure if she should say thank you or brace for something worse. When the words came, they were careful. "You didn't have to." "No," he said gently, "but someone should have." She looked at him fully then, and there was something in her eyes. Not fragility, but resistance that had grown tired. The kind that's held the world up too long with no help. "I'm Maya," she said, after a breath. "Graham," he replied. She froze for just a moment. "Graham King?" He gave a small, tired smile. "It's just a name." Maya's eyes dropped to the folder she still held like armor, then to her girls. "You don't belong in this hallway," she said, softly. Graham looked at her, then the girls, who now leaned against each other, bellies full, lids heavy. "Maybe today I do." She didn't answer. But something subtle shifted. A pause. A crack of silence that held something almost like permission. "The PFA?" They walked outside together, the late morning wind catching the hem of her dress. The girls clung to her sides, their small fingers wrapped around her sleeves. "Didn't think anyone would notice," she said quietly. "I almost didn't," he replied. "But I'm glad I did." She stopped beside the curb, eyes flicking to the crosswalk. "I can't afford a lawyer. I didn't ask you to. I didn't ask for anything." "I know," he said, looking at her gently. "That's why I'm still here." The wind picked up again, stirring her hair. She looked at him like she was trying to believe he meant it. "If I say yes to help, what happens next?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at her daughters, now blinking up at him like he was someone worth trusting. He turned back to her. "Then we fight," he said quietly, "and this time, you won't be doing it alone." That night, he didn't go back to the office. He sat in the silence of his penthouse, untouched food on the counter, the city glowing far below. He kept thinking about the way she said thank you, like it cost her something. The way her eyes never begged, even when her hands were shaking. The way she stood, bent, but not broken. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. And somehow, without even realizing it, he knew this wasn't going to be the last time he saw Maya Jennings. Not by choice. Not anymore. Chapter 3. Things Men Like Him Hide. The next morning, Graham walked into his office early, but he wasn't thinking about profit margins or boardroom projections. He was thinking about Mia, about the way she had stood in front of her daughters without flinching, about how tired her voice had sounded when she said, "They're calling me a thief." He couldn't shake it. By 9:00 a.m., he called Grace, his assistant, into his office. "Find me everything you can on a man named Trevor Lang," he said, "partner at Hemsley & Rowe." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Is he suing us?" "Not yet," Graham replied. "But he might regret what he's already done." Grace left without another question. She'd worked with him long enough to know when something mattered. By noon, the file was thick. Too thick for someone supposedly clean. No legal charges, no HR complaints, nothing official. Graham read between the lines. Turnover rates, whispered exits, former employees with sudden personal leaves, anonymous online reviews full of words like discomfort, unsafe after hours, protective silence. He had seen this pattern before. Men like Trevor never got their hands dirty. They just whispered, pressured, punished, and when someone said no, they buried her. He picked up the phone. "Michael," he said, his voice low. "I need a favor." Michael Sloan was one of the few people who knew Graham before the Forbes lists and six-figure suits. A former prosecutor turned civil rights attorney, someone who still believed justice mattered. They hadn't spoken in years. But Michael didn't hesitate. "What's going on?" Graham told him everything. About Maya, about the girls, about the charge that didn't feel like justice. It felt like revenge. Michael's voice was calm but charged. "I'll meet her tomorrow." That evening, Graham called Maya. He expected her not to answer. She did. Her voice was guarded, tired, worn thin. "I don't want to owe you anything," she said quietly. "You won't," he replied. "This isn't charity, it's justice." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "Okay, I'll come." The meeting was in a quiet office Graham kept for personal matters. No logos, no cameras, just soft chairs and space. Maya arrived with her hair pulled back, her blouse neat, her eyes sharp despite everything. Her girls were with a neighbor she trusted, the first time she'd left them in weeks. Michael greeted her like a human being, not a case file. He listened, really listened. Maya told him everything, how Trevor's compliments shifted, how his voice changed when she said no, how, days later, his watch went missing. And she was the only one accused. When she finished, she looked down at her hands. "There's no proof," she said quietly. "Just my word." Graham leaned forward, voice steady. "There's more than your word. There's a pattern." Michael nodded. "This happens more than people think. And men like Trevor? They know how to stay just clean enough to avoid consequence." He set his notepad down. "We'll file a countersuit, workplace retaliation, false accusation." Maya blinked. "How will I ever afford that?" "You won't," Graham said gently. She stared at him. "But why?" He was quiet for a long time. Then finally, "Because once someone helped my mother, when no one else would. And I remember what it felt like, when no one believed her." Maya didn't say anything. But something changed in her eyes. Not belief. Not yet. But something softer. A flicker out of the beginning. As she left that day, Graham walked her to the door. "Whatever happens next," he told her, "you're not alone anymore." And for the first time, Maya didn't look like she was bracing for the next blow. She looked like someone starting to believe the next day might not be the same as the last. Chapter 4, Not Just Her Word. The office smelled like old books and lemon cleaner, a scent Maya didn't associate with justice, but she was learning to. Michael was already there, poring over files. Graham stood by the window, arms crossed, gaze heavy with purpose. He hadn't slept much. Neither had she. She still didn't know why he was doing all this. Only that he hadn't left. And that mattered more than she could say. Michael looked up. "We found someone." Maya's heart jumped. "Elena Walsh," he said, flipping over a document. "She left the same firm Trevor Lang works for 5 years ago. Suddenly. No explanation. We contacted her, quietly." Maya's mouth went dry. "She signed an NDA," Michael continued, "but she agreed to meet." Ram stepped forward. "You won't be alone." Maya nodded once, slowly. She didn't trust easily anymore. But she trusted this moment. Elena walked into the room like someone carrying years of silence on her shoulders. She looked younger than Maya expected, maybe late 30s, but there were shadows under her eyes that told of things unspoken. She sat, hands trembling slightly. "I only agreed to this because of what I heard," she said. "Because I believe you." Maya swallowed hard. "Thank you." Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is the email he sent me. I shouldn't have kept it, but something told me not to forget." Michael unfolded it. Graham read over his shoulder. The words were clear. Flirtation twisted into pressure. A veiled threat. The kind of message that hides in plain sight if no one's looking for it. Maya didn't want to read it. She didn't need to. She knew that tone. She'd heard it too. "If I spoke," Elena whispered, "I'd never work again." Graham's jaw tightened. He won't threaten anyone else. By evening, everything had changed. Michael amended the case: sexual harassment, retaliation, workplace coercion. They had more than Maya's word now. They had a pattern, a document, a voice that broke the silence. Rand moved quickly, bringing in media advisors, writing careful statements. Not flashy, not explosive, just true. And when he released it, a quiet, firm message from his own name, not King Holdings, the world noticed. A powerful CEO standing behind a woman with no platform? A name that made headlines, choosing to protect one that never had a chance. The story caught fire not because of scandal, but because of humanity. And suddenly, Maya was not alone in her truth. She watched it all unfold from the safety of Graham's guest house. The girls played in the backyard like nothing had ever gone wrong. Maya watched them through the kitchen window, a cup of tea in her hands and something unfamiliar in her chest. He breathed. Not the kind that just keeps you alive, but the kind that feels like permission. Graham joined her as the sun set, quiet as ever. "They believe you now," he said. Maya looked at him, eyes soft. "They believe us," she whispered. He didn't correct her. Because she was right. That night, she fell asleep for the first time in weeks without flinching at the wind. And when she woke, the drawing the girls had taped to the wall the night before was still there. The house, a garden, and 6 people standing hand in hand. No longer a question mark, just a heart. Chapter 5. The testimony that changed everything. The courthouse felt colder that day. Maybe it was just her. Maya sat still in the hallway, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The same bench where her girls had once waited now sat empty, ghosted with memories. They were home with Maria, the retired teacher Graham had brought in to help. Safe, fed, smiling. But Maya, she was trembling. Her blouse was pressed, her papers neat, but inside everything shook. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted the whisper of her name to stop sounding like a lie. Michael walked in first, calm, composed, the way good lawyers carry thunder behind soft voices. Graham arrived next. He didn't speak at first, he just placed a hand on her shoulder. Brief, steady. "I'm right here," he said. She nodded. She didn't trust many things, but she trusted that. Inside, the courtroom was quiet but pulsing, tension beneath every breath. On one side, Maya. Small, unarmed except for truth. On the other, Trevor Lang. Expensive suit, expensive silence. A legal team that looked polished and mechanical, like they'd been hired from a catalog of confidence. The judge began with the amended filing, Now not just theft defense, but a countersuit of harassment and retaliation. Michael spoke first. Timeline, pattern, Elena's statement, the email. Graham watched as Maya's name, for the first time in months, didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like courage. Then Trevor's team responded. They tried to poke holes, called her bitter, said it was convenience, a woman who wanted attention. Maya's heart pounded, but she didn't break. And then Graham stood, not as a witness, as a character reference. The judge hesitated, then nodded. He walked to the center, the sound of his shoes swallowed by the silence. And he spoke. I've spent my entire life building systems that reward power. I know what they look like. I know how they protect the wrong people when no one stands up. He looked toward Maya. She didn't come into my life asking for help. She asked for nothing. But when I saw her sitting alone, I knew. This is the kind of woman the world tries to silence. And I refused to be part of that silence. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. But when he stopped speaking, no one moved. Not even the judge. Trevor's team didn't cross-examine. They didn't have to. They knew. The weight had shifted. The room knew the truth now, not because it was proven in numbers, but because it had been lived in wounds. The ruling didn't come that day, but it didn't matter. When Maya stepped outside, holding the folder Michael gave her, she looked like someone who could breathe again. Reporters waited. Graham didn't rush her. He asked quietly, "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I didn't think I'd make it through." "You didn't just make it through," he said. "You stood taller than anyone else in that room." She didn't speak again, but the look she gave him wasn't gratitude. It was something else, something sacred, recognition. That night, she told her daughters the truth. Not the legal terms, not the court strategy, just what they needed to know. That she stood up, that she told the truth, and again, that she didn't do it alone, and that when people try to hurt you sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stay standing. Zoe asked, "Does that mean he's gone forever?" Maya hesitated. Then Graham spoke from the doorway. "It won't be hurting anyone else," he said softly, "not anymore." The girls believed him. And for the first time, so did Maya. Chapter 6. Dinner, just dinner. The invitation came in the simplest way. Not over text, not through an assistant. Just a knock on her door. And him, standing there with a navy jacket draped over his arm, eyes a little softer than usual. "I have to attend this dinner," he said. "You don't have to come, but I'd like it if you did." Maya blinked. She looked down at her thrifted jeans, her old socks, then back at him. "You want me there?" she asked. "Well, if you go, when to go?" "I don't want to go if you're not," he replied. She hadn't worn a dress in 3 years. Not one that zipped properly, not one that hadn't already lived another life on someone else's hanger. She stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric of the dark green gown she found tucked in the back rack of a second-hand shop. The one Ava whispered made her look like a forest queen. The neckline was modest, the hem kissed her ankles. It wasn't expensive, but it was hers. When she walked down the stairs of the guest house, the girls stared at her with wide eyes. "You look like a lawyer," said Zoe. "You look like a star," Lily whispered. Maya smiled, but her hands shook. And then Graham looked up from the hallway. And all at once, she didn't feel like someone playing dress-up anymore. She felt like herself. Seen. The venue was a rooftop garden above one of Portland's oldest hotels. Candlelight flickered in glass vases. Soft jazz drifted under the stars. She walked in, on his arm, and everything around her blurred. The sharp suits, the glint of champagne, the women who wore their confidence like perfume. But she never loosened her grip on his sleeve. And he never let go. The introductions were polite. His colleagues tried to hide their curiosity, but Maya could feel it. The glances, the silent questions. Who is she? What is she doing here? But Graham didn't flinch. He turned to the woman on his left, a board member in pearls, and said, without hesitation, "This is Maya Jennings. She's the reason I remember who I am." Maya froze. He hadn't warned her. He hadn't asked, But somehow, that single sentence undid more fear in her than any apology ever could. They didn't stay long. After the meal, after the polite small talk and slow dancing, Graham leaned in and whispered, "Let's go home. This isn't where you shine." And she smiled, because he was right. Back at the house, the girls were asleep, limbs tangled on the living room floor. A Disney movie paused in midair. Maya stepped out onto the porch, heels in her hand, stars above her head. Graham joined her, tie loose, jacket gone. They stood in silence for a while, shoulder to shoulder. "You didn't have to bring me," she said. "I didn't bring you," he answered. "I asked you to come." She turned to him, eyes unsure. "Why?" He looked down at her, not as someone to protect, not as someone broken, just as someone, because you've walked through hell with grace, because my girls draw you in crones, because when I'm near you, I don't feel like I have to be anything I'm not. Maya blinked hard. "I'm not a charity case, Graham." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." She didn't kiss him. He didn't ask her to. But when she reached for his hand that night, he held it, and it felt like a vow. Not loud, not declared, just Chapter 7. The future she didn't dare say out loud. Maya never said it aloud, not to herself, not even in her prayers, but a part of her had started to imagine it. Not the fantasy. Not some picture-perfect ending where the bills vanished and every scar faded, but a life. With mornings that didn't start in panic. With a man whose silence didn't feel like punishment. With someone who stayed. It started with little things. Graham fixing the squeaky drawer in her kitchen, fumbling eggs at 6:30 a.m. because Zoe wanted scrambled, not fried this time, reading contracts at her side while Lily curled up in his lap, completely at ease. He didn't ask for a title, didn't claim space, but somehow he filled it anyway. One afternoon, while the girls were at school and the rain tapped gently on the windows, Maya found herself folding laundry in the living room. Graham sat at the table nearby, scribbling something on a yellow notepad. He looked up. "You ever think about going back to school?" She paused, towel in hand. "Why?" "You'd be good at it," he said simply. "Law or advocacy. You already know more than most people with degrees." She laughed once, soft and disbelieving. "I barely survived last year. School wasn't in the plan." "Maybe the plan needs to change." She stared at him. Not because he said it, but because he meant it. That night, she found him in the hallway, arms full of construction paper and tape. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Helping with their solar system model." He tilted his head toward the girl's bedroom. "I'm Saturn," he added with a straight face. She laughed, really laughed, the kind of laugh that didn't make her check who was listening. And then it happened. A moment she didn't expect. They were sitting on the back porch again, tea in hand as the last light faded behind the trees. Zoe pushed open the screen door. Her voice was sleepy, her braid a mess. She rubbed her eyes and whispered, "Mom, is Mr. Graham gonna stay forever?" The question floated between them like fog. Maya blinked, slowly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned her head toward the man beside her. Graham looked at Zoe, then at Maya, and with a voice quiet but steady, he said, "If you'll have me, yes." Zoe didn't question it. She nodded and went back to bed, like children do when they believe the world might finally be safe. Maya stayed still long after the door closed. She didn't cry, didn't speak, but her hand found his under the blanket they shared, and she held it tightly. Later, she would find a tiny envelope tucked between the magnets on the fridge. Inside it was a crayon drawing. 6 stick people again. This time, no question mark, just a smile on every face. And underneath it, written in careful, blocky letters, "Our family." She stared at it for a long time, then whispered the words she hadn't dared speak in years. "Maybe I don't have to keep losing everything." Chapter 8. The news, the name, the next step. When someone says your name in public with love, after a lifetime of being whispered about, it doesn't sound like a name anymore. It sounds like a promise. It started with a headline, Billionaire CEO supports wrongfully accused single mom. A love story? Maya stared at the screen, her thumb frozen above the refresh button. She wasn't even supposed to be on her phone. The girls were waiting in the kitchen for their afternoon smoothies, and Zoe was already whining about the banana ratio. But her fingers had slipped. A tap here, a click there, and suddenly, there she was. Her name, her face, right beside Graham King's. Her first instinct was fear, that old tightening in her stomach, the whisper that said, "You're not ready for this." But she was tired of being afraid, so she kept reading. Sources say Graham King has been quietly supporting Maya Jennings and her 3 daughters after her former boss falsely accused her of theft. Witnesses at the courthouse noted Mr. King arriving multiple times and staying for the entire trial. One even said, he looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered in that room. Maya blinked. The only thing that mattered. That phrase felt too soft for a headline. Too sacred. Too real. The girls were in the backyard later that evening, turning over rocks and pretending they were scientists on an expedition. Maya stood by the kitchen sink, fingers tight around a mug that had gone cold. Graham stepped in from the back porch, wiping sweat from his neck. He'd just finished replacing the fence post Ava cracked last week with a scooter. "You're in the news again," she said quietly. He didn't flinch. "I figured." She turned, brow raised. "You okay with that?" He shrugged, but it wasn't careless, it was calm. They were always going to say something. Better they say the truth. She didn't expect the tears. But they came anyway. Not because she was sad, but because it felt like someone was standing in the fire with her, not just putting it out from afar. "You didn't have to attach your name to me," she whispered. "I wanted to," he said, voice soft but grounded. "It's not just my name, it's my life now." "You are..." The real test didn't come from headlines, though. It came at Ava's school, the first grade Families Around the World Day. Each child was supposed to bring someone who represented their family, someone to stand up and say what love looked like in their home. Ava had picked Graham. When Maya saw the flyer in her daughter's backpack, she nearly dropped it. "She picked me," Graham said, stunned. "She told the teacher you build things and protect us," Maya murmured. "Said that was family." He blinked fast, then nodded. "I'll go." "You don't have to." "I want to." The gymnasium was warm and buzzing. Tiny chairs, hand-drawn flags, proud parents clapping too loud. Graham walked to the front when Ava's name was called. He stood beside a cardboard globe and a poster with her crayon drawings of their family house. One with a porch, a garden, and stick figures with heart-shaped eyes. He looked down at her, then up at the crowd. "My name is Graham King," he began. "I wasn't born into this family. I didn't raise Ava from the start. But I showed up, and I stayed, and to me, that's what love is." Silence. Then applause, louder than Maya expected. Even some tears from the teacher. That night, after dinner, Maya found him in the backyard, fixing the back gate. His hands were covered in dirt, his shirt stuck to his back. But when he looked up at her, God, she saw it. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just a man trying his best. She crossed the lawn barefoot and handed him a glass of lemonade. "You know," she said softly, "the girls are going to remember this." "I hope so," he replied. "No," she corrected gently. "They will, because today, you stood in front of people and said you're family, and they believed you, because you acted like it before you ever said it." He didn't answer. He just reached for her hand. And that night, for the first time, Maya called him by his full name. Not because it sounded distant, but because now, it belonged to her too. "Graham King," she whispered against his shoulder. The stars above, the porch light glowing behind them. "Whatever happens next, I'm not afraid anymore." He turned to her. "Neither am I." The next morning, Maya receives a letter in the mail. The return address? The office of Trevor Lang's legal team. And the note inside reads, "We are not finished." She folds it, stares at it, then looks toward the window, where Graham stands with Zoe on his shoulders, laughing. And she says aloud, Yes, we are. Then she burns the letter. You are my life now, Graham. When someone finally stays, after everyone else walked away, how do you stop waiting for the goodbye? Chapter 9. The porch light stays on. It was raining the night Maya finally told him. Not the facts, he already knew those. But the memories, the pieces she kept hidden under skin and silence. The moment came without warning. She stood in the kitchen, staring out the window while the rain whispered against the glass. The girls were asleep upstairs. The house was warm, safe. But inside her, the cold still hadn't left. "I still wake up scared," she said softly. Graham didn't speak. He just stepped closer, waiting. Sometimes I think I hear his voice, not in words, just the tone, the way it made me feel small. She turned around, clutching the edge of the counter. I feel like I'm supposed to be okay now, like I've been believed, so everything should feel better. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I still feel like I'm standing in that courtroom, waiting for the worst. Graham didn't try to fix it. He didn't give her a speech. He just held out his hand. When she took it, he brought her to the porch, the place where they always ended up when words were too heavy for walls. They sat on the bench swing, wrapped in a blanket, the storm rolling in slow and steady. "You don't have to be okay yet," he said. "You just have to stay." She exhaled, like those words cracked something open. "I thought I had to be strong for the girls, that if I let myself fall apart, I'd lose everything." "You didn't," he whispered. "And you won't." There was silence, only the sound of rain and her quiet breathing. Then she said it, almost too softly to hear. "Do you think it's possible to love someone, even if you're still putting yourself back together?" He didn't answer right away. He just reached up, gently brushed a damp strand of hair from her forehead. "I think that's the only kind of love that lasts." She kissed him then. Not like in the movies, no crescendo, no music. Just a quiet, trembling kiss between two people who had learned how to survive without love and were now learning how to live inside it. When they pulled away, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not here to rescue you," he said. "I know. I just want to be the one who leaves the porch light on." Later that week, she found the light switch taped with a little sticky note, Ava's handwriting. "Don't forget to leave it on for Mommy. She's still learning it's safe to come home." Maya sat on the floor, back against the door, tears in her eyes, laughter in her throat. Because they saw her. All of them. Even now. Even still. The next day, Graham surprised her with a binder, thick and full of tabs. "What is this?" she asked. "Your start." It was a full scholarship application to a paralegal certification program. A recommendation letter. Notes he'd made from watching her organize documents better than half his staff. "You don't have to," he said, "but I wanted you to know. You could." Maya opened the binder slowly. Her fingers trembled. "I used to think courtrooms were places that broke people," she whispered. "But maybe they can rebuild things too." He smiled. "Only if the right people walk in." That night, as the storm cleared and the sky turned a dusty pink, she lit the porch light before heading up to bed. She paused at the top of the stairs, looked back down, and whispered to no one in particular, "Leave it on. I'm coming home." Chapter 10. Our Kind of Wedding. It didn't start with a ring. It started with a drawing taped to the fridge. Stick people, drawn by Zoe this time. A banner above their heads said "We Win" in bubble letters. Below, in Lily's smaller handwriting, "Let's keep him forever, please." There wasn't a date circled, no white dress picked out, no florist. Just that picture, just that kitchen, and Graham sliding a small envelope across the counter one morning before the cereal bowls were filled. Maya opened it slowly. Inside was another drawing, Ava's this time, with the girls standing in a line, holding a sign that said, "Can he be our forever dad?" Underneath, in Graham's handwriting, "I'd like to be part of this family, officially, if you'll have me." She didn't cry. Not the way she thought she would. She just reached for his hand and whispered, "You already are." But then she added, smiling through the softness in her chest, "Yeah, because some things deserve to be said out loud, even if everyone already knows." They planned nothing extravagant. No venue, no guest list longer than 10. Just a backyard, some paper lanterns and string lights borrowed from Grace's husband. The girls scattered flower petals like they were being trusted with the most sacred task in the world. Zoe wore her sparkly sneakers under her dress. Mia tripped twice and giggled the entire way down the path. There was no music, just the sound of birds and breathing. And hearts. Maya walked out barefoot. Her ivory dress was soft, loose, and quiet, like her. Graham didn't wear a tie, just his shirt sleeves rolled, and a look in his eyes that had never existed before her. When she reached him, he held her hands like they were something ancient and holy. And then he spoke. Not loudly, not with flair, but with all the steadiness of a man who had never made a promise he didn't intend to keep. I won't promise to fix your past. I won't pretend to erase what hurt you. But I will stand beside you. I'll learn with you. I'll love your girls like they're already mine. And I'll leave the porch light on, even when you're already home. Maya smiled, eyes full but steady. I won't follow you, she said. I'll walk with you. I'll call you out when you disappear behind silence. And I'll never ask you to be anything smaller than who you are. Because we didn't find each other to hide. We found each other to live. They kissed before anyone told them to. The girls cheered like fireworks. That night, when the cake was gone and the sun had tucked itself behind the trees, Graham stood in the backyard holding Zoe's hand while she tried to teach him how to dance. I knew you'd stay, she said proudly. He smiled, crouching down to her level. I couldn't leave, he said, even if I wanted to. She hugged him, small arms, big belief. And from the kitchen window, Maya watched them. A man who'd once lived in boardrooms and silence, now being danced in circles by a child who used to fear losing everything. Later, on the porch, just the two of them again, blankets shared, fingers intertwined. Maya leaned into his shoulder and whispered, "Do you think they'll remember this when they're grown?" Graham didn't hesitate. Not every detail, but they'll remember being loved. And they'll know what home feels like. Maya closed her eyes, because this was their kind of wedding. No aisle, no chandelier, just a porch, some string lights, and the man who stayed. If this story touched you, some homes are made of brick and hardwood. Others begin on a courthouse bench when someone decides not to walk away. This story didn't begin with love. It began with hunger, with 4 little girls too polite to cry, and a man too used to silence, finally hearing it for what it was. Graham King had built his life by staying 10 steps ahead, by being sharp, strategic, alone. But then one little voice whispered, "We're hungry, sir." And suddenly, he didn't want to be alone anymore. Maya never asked to be rescued. She asked to be believed. She stood through shame, through silence, through being forgotten by the very system meant to protect her. But she didn't collapse. She endured. And that strength, that quiet kind, is what changed everything. This isn't a story about a rich man saving a poor woman. It's a story about presence, about the decision to stay when walking away would have been easier. It's about the light you leave on, so the people you love always know their way home. Because healing isn't loud. Sometimes it sounds like 4 girls giggling in the hallway. Sometimes it looks like laundry folded at midnight. Sometimes it feels like a porch swing in the dark, with a hand that never lets go. They didn't promise perfection. They didn't erase their pasts. But together they built something better. A love that doesn't demand, a future that includes everyone, and a home where no one is left waiting alone on a bench. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of something you lost or hope to find again, then stay close, because the next story goes even deeper. I'll be waiting for you there. Until then, leave the light on.